signing pops in out of nowhere. And he starts talking about girls that he went to school with. I didn't know where to start, you know? I honestly thought about going outside to get him the back. So once she found her serious relationship, that's it. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, I agree. So yeah, so that's and the younger one's a little different. Either way, I'm a pretty good judge of character. You know what I'm saying? See, and you don't even know me, and you're giving me advice. And I like it. This is outside advice. You know? No, you don't have to tell me. I know. I've been hustling my whole life, you know? I know. Yeah. And how are you? You found it? Right for you. How much do you need? You go talk to you go talking to a fucking the financial advisor, and he's talking $2 million, and I'm like, what the like what are you talking about? I don't want to like yeah, you live the way you're living. They're going to have to pay these people to not do anything because there's no other solution. There's no, like the Industrial Revolution employed people. This revolution eliminates everything, dude. It like eliminates everything. Everybody's like, oh, what about this way? Like, what about this way? And now you got, you know. Excuse me, I just have to get What? Got all our guys. A while ago. All right. I don't think we'll get anywhere through these doors. What are you going to say? So we ended the detention with the
both these guys are pretty similar, you know? Rod's pretty good too. He's another guy who overshoots everything too. But Bob is shoots so much.
Hey, do you have a
Oh, a money? No. You got yours. What kind of screw is it? I got it. Okay. I in my car. I got a whole screw. You got a tweaker? You might be able to do it with a tweaker.
No, forget about that, Johnny. Go audio, Johnny.
you said once you get it.
Audio.
ฉันว่าฉันฟังไม่ผิดนะเขาบอกว่า
No way around that. Yes, I got the play. That's what I'm saying. I don't know. I think I'll.
What are you guys waiting for?
Well, it's like I heard she's doing this a lot.
Greg.
And I was like, I bet you can not retire. I was saying that I could see, oh my god, was text with that was one of like really two voice. I was texting you. I would text to Jenny and then Carol was like, you're still setting. I'm not mad that it's not redacted. I'm mad that you said it properly because I really was scared. But yeah, let's see. I don't know, that's like me saying like, I love like this industry and I can't like say I want to get into it comes with a job. Yeah. Any star that says like I can't do interviews, that's not part of my job, part of my job is that no service. My issue is that I feel like he doesn't respect because he doesn't give it straight. You'll never, like, that's the one interview that you're, the thing that you're referring to is the one interview you actually get. Where you get a great feedback, and that's a little bit everything else in this. I don't really have to do is I didn't see my kids on Father's Day. I don't really get on. I'm just going to follow them around. It's almost kind of a joke.
It's also, like, you know what this thing is? They want to keep their private life private.
It's bad after the first time I did it. Like, this isn't funny. And if I'm your kid, I'm rolling off of it. Like, and I remember being a simple favor for you, which was like, I really kind of hear doing this. He posed with her, which I think is nice to do. When you show up and pose on the market stage every week. And then they got posing this kind of interview. And like, he turned to like the girl, and then he turned to her, thinking that I guess he'd do right. He was like, good luck with all this kind of shit. And then and I was like, and then she was asking me immediately following. And I'm like, so I know
Waiting on the way to my
And then it's like
expected. I'm sorry, I'm saying is he does not keep away. Like, he won't put his arm on her shoulder. He is not doing anything. He really doesn't. But it's changing. Yeah. Well, I thought that was I actually
You got it. Enjoy your trip.
What camera are you shooting with? You like it? It's light. It's a chunker. You should carry the camera up. See what the chunker is. It's nice. Looks good? Oh, okay. Is it their camera or is it your camera? My camera. Good luck, man. Thanks, man. You too.
But what if that a reason to destroy?
Mic check 1, 2, 3. Mic check 1, 2, 3. Check, check. We're good? Good? Welcome, guys.
I'm at war. Just like everyone else, you know? You guys NBC? Okay. What's that? The water? You might have to plan a vacation. You might not make it back. They opened the store. Yeah, everything. There's no. Don't you say that to everybody?
If you're rich, then you go up.
you put it to work? Say that.
They together?
No, what happened was, they became clear that
Gangsters? Let's make them say gang.
no, the kid was nice. The kid was nice. I just know that your eyes to it. This is when they
That's been happening for years, so,
Venezuela, yeah.
the government got over their own there, you know.
Tell the truth.
No, you don't.
It's like that land has more oil, more gold, more diamonds. Every holiday. Why is the Four Seasons?
Why are you driving that Range Rover? I just like I got into this, basically they stole it from the government. Stole everything from the government. That's the story of life.
Oh, hold on. We could finish that in a second. At the end of the day, she's still with them, but they're not together. But I tried to get the end of the story.
They were from me. I
That's my biggest issue.
His daughter was smart enough to bail out. See my daughter getting out. She'd be like, oh, bad guy, I like it, you know? Girls like bad guys, you know?
But now, then she's down.
Still with the guy? Alright, so tell me the good story. I'm telling you my story now. The good story. You're leading them, you know. There's a chance to say?
Maybe your daughter will do something. You're trying to
Listen. Listen, they're adults, they gotta learn one way or the other. You can only plant the seeds, you know? But I think she's smarter than I am, you know that. She is. Yeah, I am street smart. But you know what I'm saying, Mom? I know. But it's a him. It's not a daughter.
You know, he was really terrible. He was doing like, he was trying to like all that crazy shit.
Hey everybody, and welcome to our special coverage here on Law and Crime of the Justin Baldoni Blake Lively hearing that is happening today out in federal court in New York. That is a live look that you see right there. I am Jesse Weber. Thank you so much for joining us. So the behind-the-scenes drama between It Ends With Us co-stars, it is making its way into a courtroom ahead of a judge for the first time since all of these shocking allegations became public. And I will tell you, today is going to be very interesting. They're going to be talking about a number of things, but one of the things they're going to be discussing today is Blake Lively's team's request for a protective order on what can and can't be said by attorneys and the parties ahead of a trial. It is very interesting timing. Why? Something big happened over the weekend, which we're going to talk about in a second. But remember, this contentious legal battle with Blake Lively, it started with filing a complaint against Justin Baldoni, accusing him, others that were connected to him, of creating a hostile work environment on the set, that he engaged in sexual harassment. And she claims that in the end, he and his team orchestrated a smear campaign in the media and in the public against her. Baldoni has countersued, claiming that he is actually the victim, that he's the victim of false allegations from both her and her husband, Ryan Reynolds, that she tried to hijack the movie from him. And by the way, he also sued the New York Times too. He says that their bombshell piece on this whole case that was published the day after Lively filed her initial complaint, he says that this was collusion, that they worked with Blake Lively on this for months before. Now, why did I say the timing of this is important? Because over the weekend, Baldoni's team dropped another bombshell. They launched a new website titled Lawsuit Info, essentially refuting the claims of sexual harassment on the set. And as part of it, the website links a 168-page amended, actually it's a longer amended complaint. It's in the 200-page, I think it's 224-page amended complaint. And there's also a timeline of events surrounding the film. By the way, that's their version of events, but it's very, very interesting, including getting new text messages that we've never seen before from Ryan Reynolds. We'll talk more about that. Now, but again, what's so interesting is on a hearing where it's about whether or not Justin Baldoni's attorney, Brian Friedman, should be making public comments and releasing information about this case to the public and the media. Right before a hearing on that, they launched this website with more of this information. I got to get some perspective on that in a second, but I also want to let you know we're going to be following updates from that courtroom. We have a source inside. We'll keep live reporting, but also our very own Elizabeth Milner is going to be in that courtroom. She's going to come out later, give us a live look on what she saw and what she heard, but we're also going to be taking your questions on YouTube about this case. And by the way, talking YouTube, we put up a poll about who you believe right now in this case. 96% of the people who were polled believe Justin Baldoni. They are siding with Justin Baldoni, 4% for Blake Lively. We'll talk about what that means. So let me bring on my guests as we go through this. And by the way, we have an update in court. So Judge Louis J. Lyman, who's overseeing this, he just says, I have consolidated the cases. This is something we knew already. That means that all the actions are now going to be part of one. Lively's claim against Baldoni, Baldoni's claim against her, and Baldoni's claim against the New York Times. It's all one case. I'd like to hear from the Lively parties first, then the Wayfarer Baldoni parties. I'd like to hear the information. I'll manage this case, discovery information required, and legal issues. Lively's lawyer from Wilkie Farr, which, by the way, is a prominent, high-powered law firm. Our plan at docket 49 is no longer feasible. Counsel for Wayfair did not tell us they plan to file an amended complaint, including a 168-page compendium full of text messages. There is authority to deconsolidate the cases. Ooh, that's interesting. And then Lively's lawyer followed up. The Times may have its own views, so it seems like the New York Times has their own counsel there. We'd like to confer. Given that the Wayfair parties added a new defendant, we have contemplated amending our own complaint. We have 2 weeks to do it. We think we can still make the trial date of March 9th, 2026. Okay, let me bring in right now acclaimed criminal defense attorney to the stars, Bradford Cohen, and also Law&Crime's general counsel, Elizabeth Vulaj. It's great to have you both here. Bradford, I got to start with the million-dollar questions here. So the hearing is on Monday. The hearing is today. The hearing is about can Brian Friedman, who's representing Baldoni, should he not be making public statements? Should he not be releasing evidence in this case? We know that it was his side who released that infamous montage dance footage from the set, the B-roll footage that, you know, they argued kind of refutes Blake Lively's claims. And yet, in the eve of a hearing that's about this, they launch a website with an amended complaint and a timeline of events and more evidence and more text messages. Bold strategy, smart strategy, what do you think?
Bold strategy. I don't know how smart it is in front of this judge. This judge is like a no-nonsense guy. He does a lot of high-profile cases. The issue that comes about when you open up this website is essentially it is the complaint and the attachments to the complaint. Doesn't look like, I went through everything on that website, it doesn't look like there's additional information like a statement or something that hasn't been filed in court. You have 168 pages of an attachment and you have the actual complaint itself. So I don't know if the judge is going to freak out about that website. Certainly the timing was not good. The website itself, just releasing what is already public, I don't think the judge could put a gag order on that. But the things of them coming out with like additional footage, things that are not in evidence, things that no one has been considered yet, things that are not in front of the court, I think he's probably going to put a cap on that, put a lid on that, and not allow them to start putting other evidence into the, you know, the ether for other people to start, you know, kind of picking apart and trying to choose sides. Like you said, you already had a poll and 96% believe Justin Baldoni. That isn't just because he's just Justin Baldoni. That's because they have been creating a narrative and been putting things out into the public that have now swayed people onto his side.
See, Bradford, let me just follow up. Some people would say it's genius, right? You put it out before the possibility that the judge would issue a protective order. The world has already seen it. And this is a fight that is just as important in the court of public opinion as it is in a court of law. Some people would say that was genius.
Oh, I would concur that it is genius.
Yeah.
We're debating whether it's right or wrong and whether or not the judge is going to put a cap on it.
That whole legal thing. That whole legal thing.
The whole legal stuff. But is it a genius move? 100%. In these high-profile cases, the very first thing that I do, the very first thing that ever comes up in these cases is I file a gag order type motion to say, hey, judge, I don't want them discussing anything that's not public record. I don't want anything out there that's not public record that they haven't filed on. And of course, when you file a complaint, when you file attachments, knowing that in the back of your head, you are filing things because you know the judge isn't going to allow you just to say it. So you usually put it in your motions and things of that nature. So the very first thing, and I'm surprised because these law firms are pretty big and very knowledgeable, I would imagine that the attorneys are very knowledgeable guys. That's the very first thing you file in this. You file your complaint, and then with the complaint, you file a motion to say, hey, it's a gag order motion. These people shouldn't be discussing it when they get served. They shouldn't make statements, things of that nature, and set that for hearing right away.
So we're waiting for an update from court. It's coming in now. Before I do, let me ask you this, Elizabeth. The big thing that people are talking about from what was launched over the weekend are the Ryan Reynolds text messages. So Justin Baldoni, Ryan Reynolds, they're having this conversation. This is before all the drama. It seems to be about mutual respect. Ryan Reynolds is talking about how much he adores Justin Baldoni. He's asking if he can, delay the schedule or increase the schedule of the production by 2 weeks so that the family could be together. He makes some very Deadpool-esque humor, you know, even signs it XO, like seemingly in reference to Gossip Girl. What's the significance of those text messages?
Yeah, I think one of the big things about those slew of text messages is that he's highlighting what a good rapport and good relationship that they had before all of this happened. And I think that's something that he did with Blake Lively as well. You know, he released montages, voice memos where they were really respectful of each other. And I think he's trying to show the evolution of how this all changed completely. And also remember, he also doesn't just have claims against Blake Lively. Ryan Reynolds is incorporated into this complaint. He has claims of defamation against him, civil extortion. So I think he's just trying to fill this up. This is his sort of last chance, at least in the complaint stage, to try to drum up what claims he has against Ryan Reynolds too.
And for me, one of the things that it struck me was, you know, there's two ways to look at it, right? One way to look at it is, you know, you're characterizing Justin Baldoni in a certain light. Is he really the type of person that would sexually harass Blake Lively and then initiate a smear campaign against her? Whereas the other way you could look at it, there were text messages that were produced by Blake Lively's side where you could say, like, he was asking at one point, should we reverse the narrative to make it look like Ryan Reynolds is anti-feminist? So you're looking at two different people, and a jury is ultimately going to have to consider, who do we believe? Are they being transparent in their messages to one another, or is there something behind the scenes? In fact, you know, you think about that, a jury trial for maybe March 2026, if it still lasts, but I think that's another big concern, right?
Yeah, that's a really big concern. And also one of the tough issues, I think, in this case is, where do you draw the line from crisis PR to smear campaign?
Right.
So there's a lot of text messages where Justin Baldoni says to his team, you know, we should change the narrative, this is really concerning, versus where does that line draw between trying to drum up good press, which is, you know, what all PR professionals do, versus trying to take her down. And I think what his side is doing is trying to say, we're only just responding to the backlash she initiated.
So we're taking your questions right now on YouTube. We have a question from Tanya R. What does it mean Lively's side wants to deconsolidate? So we have an update from court about that. Remember, this was a consolidated action. All of their lawsuits would be combined as one. Judge Lyman has asked Lively's lawyer, you are suggesting you'll add new parties by next Friday. How quickly would you serve them? Because again, there was this idea of maybe they would deconsolidate the cases. They made the point that the Wayfarer parties, Justin Baldoni's side, has added a new defendant. Lively's lawyer said, we'll ask them to accept service. If they say no, we'll immediately start trying to serve them. There's one set of lawyers on the other side. Can you break it down for us, Bradford, what this means to deconsolidate, why they're looking for this, and which way you think the court is going to side here?
Sure. So there's a bunch of stuff to unpack there. Number one is when you consolidate, meaning the judge is putting two lawsuits together to be heard at the same time. Usually it's the same parties, it revolves around the same issues, or tangentially revolves around those same issues, and it's better for the ends of justice to consolidate. What Blake Lively's attorneys are saying is, hey, we're going to add parties that are not parties to this other lawsuit, that have issues that are not going to be issues to this other lawsuit. They also are amending, Baldoni's attorneys are amending to add someone, and these things shouldn't be consolidated. They should be deconsolidated, meaning it would be easier to try them separately, to be heard separately. And I think that's the only way they make that that trial date of March 26th. I don't care how big your law firm is, to get depositions done, to get discovery done, to get all these issues done between now and March 26th, especially when you're these big, you know, kind of moving law firms. You know, you're talking about GM versus Toyota in the 70s. When you're slimmer and you can move faster, maybe you can get to that date in terms of like having an agreement of only taking like 5 depositions. But these big firms, they're going to take 20 depositions. There's probably 20 lawyers on every side that has to, you know, okay, I can't be there. I have my kid's date here. I'm taking a vacation next week. So all these things have to be coordinated. I think that it's going to be very difficult for a consolidated case to make it to March 26th and be heard on all the issues. And I think that's what they're saying. They're also going to provide case law, and the case law is pretty clear about when there's different parties involved and there's different issues involved, whether or not they should consolidate the cases into one or deconsolidate but still be in front of the same judge.
And it talks about how complicated a case like this is going to be, which brings me to a question from Jane on YouTube, Elizabeth. How are the jury going to be chosen given the fact that everybody in the U.S. knows about this case?
Yeah, that's the difficult part, right? It's not just that there's well-known people involved, Justin Baldoni, Ryan Reynolds, but this film made over $300 million. A lot of people went to the theater to see it, so there's going to be a lot of potential jurors that have context of the film, what happened, and a lot of people are tuning into this just because they might be interested in celebrity gossip. So I think that's going to be tough. I think if you're looking to find jurors who might not have a lot of firsthand knowledge about this already, it's going to depend potentially on age, on interests, what kind of news they tune into for fun. And I think that's the challenge. And that's one of the things that kind of both sides are claiming, is that the potential jury pool might be tainted right now because of what's going on.
And we're seeing, like you said, the public's stance already on this, and it seems to be, at least from the poll and what you see a lot of times online, siding with Justin Baldoni. Not saying that's everybody, not saying there are those who don't support Blake Lively, but we actually did sidebars up on like celebrities who are supporting both sides. And I want to play something which is interesting to see why people might be siding with Justin Baldoni over Blake Lively. So one of the interesting things that came out in the last 2 weeks was an audio tape, and it was a voice note that was sent by Justin Baldoni to Blake Lively at around 2 a.m., and he was apologizing. And to provide a little bit more context to that, the idea was he not taking seriously her revisions to a key scene? She wanted to rewrite the infamous rooftop scene. Now, his view is, I heard her concerns, heard how she wanted to change the scene, but I felt the pressure from Ryan Reynolds and Taylor Swift, who's good friends with Ryan Reynolds and Blake Lively. They approached me, told me how great her revisions were. I felt I had no choice but to accept them. I felt I had no choice but to acquiesce to her demands. Now, the other side of it would be a 2 a.m. voice note, even though it appears Blake Lively had messaged him about 10 minutes before, with a very personal text. Is that appropriate for the defendant to send, is that appropriate for the director to send a voice note at 2 a.m. talking about some interesting things? Is this appropriate when we're talking about a sexual harassment lawsuit? Let's play you the apology and we'll talk about it on the other side.
I want to start with an apology. Man, reading the second part of your message, my heart sank, and I'm really sorry. I for sure fell short, and you worked really hard on that, and the way you framed it, and how that made you feel. I just want to say thank you for sharing that with me. That takes a lot of trust and vulnerability, and I feel really grateful that you feel safe enough to tell me that that's how you feel and share that with me. And I'm really sorry. I f***ed up. That is a fail on my part. One thing you should know about me is I will admit and apologize when I fail. I am far from perfect. I am a very flawed man, as my wife will attest. And and I'm gonna f*** up. I'm gonna say the wrong thing. I'm gonna put my foot in my mouth. I'm gonna piss you off probably, but I will always apologize and find my way back to center. That is one thing I can assure you of. And I'm sorry I made you feel that way. That must have felt terrible. And I will for sure do better. That was not my best weekend.
And in that voice note, he also talks about part of her body. He talks about how he wants all of Blake Lively. Now, I'm not suggesting that it was a sexual reference, but you could say, if you make a comment like that, a production may not be an accounting office, but workplace rules, hostile work environment rules apply the same. We'll talk about that in a second. We do have an update from court. Lively's lawyer says this case involves a number of high-profile individuals, including third parties. We intend to seek a protective order. There has been a significant amount of leaking materials to the media. We want to list all the parties from the beginning. They also said there will be numerous depositions, including on the false light claims. That's regarding false light invasion of privacy, the idea that during the production, Blake Lively was shown what she says was allegedly pornography, that people were coming into her trailer. Discovery will involve issues typical in sexual harassment cases and communications by defendants and their agents in the media, including people who may have been paid. So they're trying to organize this case right now. Bradford, I'll start with you about the idea of the audio tape. Still not entirely clear who released it and how it was released. Who do you think that helps? Who do you think it hurts?
Depends on the context. I mean, the vocal fry, the 2 a.m. call, I'm so sorry, it's unusual. Maybe it's not unusual in the Hollywood scene. If that's my wife and she's in certain scenes with an individual and he's calling to apologize and that's his apology, the way that he apologizes, I think it's weird. Now, I'm no expert in Hollywood. I would imagine that I would be a pretty good juror in this case because the only thing I know is like Deadpool, and I know Ryan Reynolds from his movies. I'm not a Blake Lively fan. I didn't even know who Justin Baldoni was.
Clearly, you're not a Jane the Virgin fan. Very disappointing.
I am not a Jane the Virgin fan. I don't even know what that is. So, I think you're looking for probably when we talk about jurors, someone like that. And if you're looking for that and someone like me or someone that, is married and has a wife that someone calls at 2 o'clock in the morning and this is kind of the apology, again, I need to know more context surrounding this tape and surrounding why he was apologizing and what it was about and how it came about. But the way he's saying it, it is a little, to me, and I'm not saying for everybody, it's a little creepy the way the voice and the apology is weird. I don't know if it helps him. The actual words probably help him, where he's like, I always apologize. I'm a good guy, and my wife will testify to that, and all these different things. The words help him. The way it is said probably helps her because it is weird. It's like, a bedroom voice apology. I think that's strange.
And Elizabeth, I want to get your perspective on this, but we do have an update from court. The judge here just said, you each know of the third parties that are going to have interests whose interests you are going to want to protect, so I guess meaning a protective order. You have a number of high-profile people, Lively's lawyer says, will submit a protective order by March 11th, so that's a bit of time. Judge, what about Miss Jones? And obviously, Stephanie Jones is a key character in this case as well. Let me ask you this, Elizabeth, just going back to, first of all, I don't know what I want to ask you first. I'll talk about the protective order in a second. Talk about the audio. You heard the context in the sense like, if his argument would be, I'm only saying that because I feel bullied and intimidated and pressured by Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds and Taylor Swift. I gotta do this mea culpa, I have to apologize. But the way he did it for 6.5 minutes, even if it's well-intentioned, if he's the director and he's the co-star and he is mentioning a part of her body and he is, leaving this voice note at 2 a.m. even though she, allegedly wrote him 10 minutes before, is that just what we say in the law? Is that, strict liability? This is sexual harassment in and of itself. If he said those things, that's it. Game over.
I don't think it's that simple. So I think I agree with Bradford that it sort of depends on how you could argue it. So a lot of people, when this first came out, the headline said, Justin Baldoni's 2 a.m. voice memo to Blake Lively. A lot of people would say that's not really appropriate, sending something at 2 o'clock in the morning. He talks about wanting to have all of her. The language is sort of suggestive. But again, I think his team could point to it and say he tried everything to appease her, to make sure she felt heard, to really show a good faith effort to collaborate with her, but still that wasn't enough. And his account is that she took over the film, and that sort of adds to his extortion claims and other things. Whereas her team could say, yes, she sent this text message at 1:50 a.m. He responded in a voice note. It wasn't really appropriate. He talked about having all of her. So I really think either side could argue it either way.
Yeah, and that's what's interesting about this. Bradford, I want to ask your opinion about what is going on in court right now. So they're talking about a protective order, submitting it by March 11th. How does that work? If they're having issues right now about people saying things in the media and information being discussed, you wait over a month for a protective order to draft one, or they'll submit one. And by the way, Miss Jones that's Stephanie Jones. So she had at one point employed Jennifer Abel, who was one of Justin Baldoni's PR representatives. There's a lot of different players in this case. Now Stephanie Jones has filed a lawsuit, but just to give everybody a little context there. I don't understand, we'll submit a protective order by March 11th. That feels a long way off.
Yeah, it's really weird. Like I said, in the cases that I have, and we've represented a lot of high-profile individuals with a lot of different issues, the cases that I've had, I file those protective orders right away. Like, you don't wait until all the evidence comes out, until they say something in front of the press, until they start giving press conferences. You don't wait for that. You do it when the complaint gets filed, you immediately file those protective orders. What I think is weird also is I heard that they're filing a motion that Blake Lively doesn't want her deposition taken by Baldoni's lead lawyer, that she wants someone else, which I think is weird. There's a lot of things in this case that I think are very strange, and maybe it's some sort of strategy that they have. And I don't like to play Monday morning quarterback with lawyers because sometimes that's their strategy. I don't know. They're waiting till March 11th for some unknown reason. I've just never seen it before. I think that they should have had that prepared and ready to go right out of the gate. I don't know why they didn't. I think there might be a pending motion to dismiss. There's probably motions that are going to have to be heard between now and March 26th. In addition to these depositions, I just don't see how they get the trial on March 26th and have a fruitful trial on March 26th. It's going to be very, very unusual. But, and not only that,
by the way, we're talking about March. We're talking about March 2026. So it's a year from now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, 2026. Okay. I thought it was March 26th.
No.
I was blown away. I was like, there's no way. But even in 12 months, I don't even think they're going to hit that in 12 months, to be quite honest with you. This is a case that could take 18 to 24 months just to complete discovery. So I don't think that that's a doable date even in 12 months. It's just one of those things that, like I said, as you go, you're going to be peeling back layers of the onion, and it's going to get deeper and deeper, and emails and more people and more depositions. I just don't see that happening.
So we have an update from court. Lively's lawyer said, we'll see if the case gets consolidated for purposes of discovery. Now Baldoni's lawyer, Brian Friedman, has jumped into the mix. We intend to dismiss the California case and go forward here. The judge said, what have you added in the amended complaint? And he said promissory fraud. So if you actually look at the amended complaint that was filed over the weekend, this is against the New York Times. So again, now they've combined their actions against Lively and Reynolds, also with the New York Times. Then Justin Baldoni's lawyer, Brian Friedman, said, I don't know who the other parties are they aim to add, meaning I don't know who Blake Lively is going to add as other defendants in their case. If they will need to separate counsel, but discovery will be the same. Judge Lyman respond, what far along was the California case? Maybe how far along was the California case? And Friedman said, not at all. It makes no sense to be on two coasts. What do you make of that?
I think that makes sense. So originally, Blake Lively filed her complaint. It was a civil complaint within the department in California. And it's essentially based on the same claims, transaction occurrences as New York. So a lot of times, at least within New York federal court, matters are consolidated if it's based on the same premise or series of actions. So I think it does make sense. I also think just in terms of economically, you can avoid having to have California counsel versus New York counsel, and it's all based on the same allegations. So I think it makes sense.
All right, we have another update. Brian Friedman, we're asking to hold Miss Lively's deposition as soon as possible. We don't need any documents to do that. The harms have been ongoing since the New York Times article came out. Losses to Wayfair and Melissa Nathan losing clients. Melissa Nathan is Justin Baldoni's crisis management expert, who again is a key figure in this case. She's accused of being a part of that alleged smear campaign against Blake Lively. Let me ask you about this, Bradford. So going back to the deposition, why does Brian Friedman want to hold this deposition of Blake Lively immediately? Like, is it potentially to release information to the public so they can hear? I don't know if that'll even be allowed. And B, I have never heard of a case where anyone can dictate which lawyer they want to question them, whether that's even in a deposition, whether that's cross-examination. I don't see much luck there. So talk to me about both issues. Why does he want the deposition immediately? And does she have any grounds to choose who will depose her?
Okay, so let's start with the easier one. She's going to lose the one where she's trying to decide who's going to depose her. Believe me, when I tell you, if defendants were able to do that, I'd be out of a job, because no defendant would want me cross-examining them or asking them questions on deposition. Same thing with Mr. Freeman. She doesn't want him, probably because he's a very aggressive guy and he's made some statements that are probably very aggressive, and they don't want that type of individual. She may be, maybe there's something about him that she doesn't like, and that she feels like in a deposition she's not going to be able to do her best because of that, the statements he made. She won't be able to contain her emotions. Whatever it is, she's going to lose on that. You don't get to dictate who gets to take your deposition. Now, if he said something really, 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 and this is not the case, but really outrageous, maybe she would have a 10 or 20% chance of winning that motion. She, to me, has a 0.0001% chance of winning that motion. I don't see that happening. Now, the second part of that, of Freeman taking her deposition quickly, I think he wants to get it out. He wants to get all these facts out. Yeah, I think that he would use that deposition. Obviously, that's going to be part of the motion that they filed to put a gag order on it, to have a certain limitation on what can be exposed to the public. But I guarantee that's why he wants to do it so quickly, is because he wants to get a deposition. He wants to catch her in some aha moments and then release either the video or release the transcript, and again, effectuate some sort of judgment on a potential jury. That's what I think the strategy is. Also, I think it also throws everyone off their game. When you just start hitting them, saying, I don't need any interrogatories, I don't need any kind of discovery, I don't need any of that. I want to take her depo. I don't need anything else. I'm ready to go. I can take her deposition tomorrow. I have everything I need to question her. That puts a certain pressure on them, a certain pressure on the individual, and they're going to now start going on the defense, saying like, oh, we can't do the depo until 2 months from now or a month and a half from now, because these big law firms, they're going to prep her over a week or 2 weeks in terms of a deposition. They're not just going to let her walk into a depo cold, and people don't understand that. Real lawyers, they prep their witnesses for deposition, and they prep their witnesses for trials. They don't walk in cold. The person isn't just start answering questions. They've answered that question probably 20 times by the time they get to deposition.
Well, I think we got an answer on the depositions. Just came in. So Mr. Freeman, who again is representing Mr. Baldoni, we need to move forward to still have livelihoods. I can work as early as today to know if the new parties can be represented by us. We don't want delay, to which Judge Lyman apparently responded, you'll get document requests. I'm not going to allow depositions now. And also we have another update. Judge Lyman, I don't want depositions to have to be done twice, so no depositions until we know who all the parties are. And then these are lawyers now for Leslie Sloan and Vision PR. These are additional parties that were sued by Justin Baldoni, associates and PR representatives of Blake Lively. We're going to move to dismiss the false light and civil extortion claims. Okay, it's a lot to break down here. First, your reaction, Elizabeth, to the idea the judge is not going to allow depositions at this point?
Yeah, I'm not surprised at that. Depositions usually happen at a later stage, especially in federal cases like this in the Southern District. And usually they're done once the parties have had a chance to exchange written discovery, right? So that once they've requested documents and been able to look at them from the other side, asked interrogatories, so asking for answers to certain questions that they have. That way they have more to ask during the actual deposition, right? They have a chance to really counter what the other party produced during written discovery. It's really, really rare that parties go right to depositions before that. But like Bradford was saying, I see why he wants to move so quickly. As part of it is because her team doesn't want her deposed by him.
And talk to me, Bradford, about this, the fact that it seems that Leslie Sloan and Vision PR, who again are the PR representatives of Blake Lively, they want to dismiss the civil extortion claims. So I'm going back to the amended complaint. They are parties to that. This is the idea that that Blake Lively and her Vision PR and Ryan Reynolds, they made threats to Justin Baldoni and Wayfarer. That the allegations they knew to be wrongful. These threats to breach contracts, defame the Wayfarer parties, injure their livelihoods, unless I guess the element is unless they did what they wanted. and then the the false light claims as well. I'm just pulling up the amended complaint here. I'll get a further corroboration about that. But the idea that you have this other party to the lawsuit who wants to dismiss these claims brought forward by Justin Baldoni. Bradford, you with us?
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Hey, Bradford, can you hear me?
Okay, good. Yeah. So 2 things. One thing about the dismissal, again, it goes to strategy, right? And they may say like, hey, these actions to me are going to be either dismissed by the court, or they got a letter from Blakely's lawyer saying, if you don't dismiss this, we're going to be moving for our attorney's fees because this is why, and laid it out why. So they might be kind of taking a frontal step about, hey, listen, this is why these things should be dismissed. We have nothing to do with it. And they sometimes those things get granted on those grounds. It just depends on, again, how they're laid out in the complaint. What I also wanted to address was with Freeman asking for the deposition, don't forget, you are reporting on it right now in real time. Other people are reporting on it in real time. Freeman he understands how this all works, how the publicity works. And it's rather genius by getting your arguments out and saying, like, I want to take your depo tomorrow. He knows the judge is not going to allow it. He knows the judge is not going to allow him to take the depo, but it gives the appearance that, like, hey, I don't need anything. I'm ready to go to trial. I want to take your deposition. It gives the appearance that they are ready to go, that they know that this is a BS case, that they know that she's lying. All these different things are relayed in his actions in court that now everyone is reporting on. So a headline tomorrow could be like, hey, Freeman's ready to go to take a deposition tomorrow. He's ready to go to trial. So all those things play into these high-profile cases. That's a little inside baseball where some lawyers don't get it. Some big firm lawyers don't get it. They don't understand that everything that they're being said, I mean, they do understand that it's going to be reported on, but the way you say it, what you asked for, and how it's said, those are all going to be reported on, and that all sways a potential jury.
And by the way, just to go back to this, so what's going on, it seems, is that you have this party who says, whatever we're being sued for, we're not even a part of it. So if you're talking about extortion, we're not a part of it. If you talk about false light, invasion of privacy, where Justin Baldoni says, the New York Times and the Lively parties, Ryan Reynolds, Slow and Vision, they all released and disclosed information that was personal to my life. It put us in a false light. This is why he's been suing the New York Times for defamation. And I'll read you a little bit more. We have an update from court. So the lawyers who are representing Vision PR, this PR agency, this is really a case about their crisis management team saying they're going to bury people. They're just finger pointing at us. We want to move to dismiss. The judge said, are you moving for a stay of discovery, meaning a pause on discovery? The lawyer says, we shouldn't be subject to it. My client's female-run company shouldn't be subject to this. Judge said, what about interrogatories? They are standard. The lawyer says, we believe you will dismiss us as a defendant. Judge says, let me hear from the parties in Jones v. Abel. So that is now a separate cause of action. That's a separate lawsuit where the person who had been running the PR agency, I know this is so complicated, the person who had been running Justin Baldoni's PR agency, the PR agency that had been representing him, Stephanie Jones, another woman named Jennifer Abel had been working for her. And Jennifer Abel and Stephanie Jones got into a conflict where Jones has accused Abel of basically turning on her, trying to steal her clients, manipulating Baldoni against her. Again, very, very complicated. I'm going to go back to Elizabeth on this. The bottom line is you were having two parties to this. So Leslie Sloan and Vision PR, her company, being thrown out. They want this case dismissed against them. The extortion and also the false light claims. Do you think they have grounds there?
I think potentially, right? So I think a big part of the argument behind all of the PR professionals is saying, look, we were just doing what we were directed to do. This is standard in crisis PR. There was no public smear campaign. And I think it makes sense that they're asking for discovery either to be stayed or that it's not going to apply to them, because why have to be subject to discovery, release information about your business or what went on if it's ultimately going to get dismissed anyway? I don't know if they're going to get complete dismissal right away. Judges are not really prone to dismissing cases so quickly. They want to give parties an opportunity to conduct discovery. But, you know, there's a possible chance later on that they might be.
Let me ask you a separate question about this. So there's two separate issues. Was Justin Baldoni sexually harassing Blake Lively on the set? And also, did he engage and devise a smear campaign against her? The more he's showing that she took control of the film, the more that she took control of the wardrobe, the script writing, that he wasn't allowed to attend the premiere, how much does that relate to the smear campaign? Because there's two ways to look at it, right? Either A, you know, I worked with my PR representatives to hide what I did on set. I knew she was coming out. I wanted to get out in front of it. I wanted to make her look bad. This is what Blake Lively would claim. Whereas he could say, they're leveling false allegations against me. I'm getting boxed out of my own film. I'm on the defensive. Talk to me about, you know, that connection between how well, because I think he's made a pretty good argument so far based on the messages that she was taking pretty strong control. Was it because, you know, she was power hungry, or was it because he really was doing something on set and he's like, I don't want any of this to come out, do whatever you want? I'm struggling with what to believe and what to make sense of. Tell me what you think.
All those communications and information about her taking over everything from wardrobe to script, all that, I think it does two things. One of the claims that he's making against her specifically is what's called breach of an implied covenant of good faith and fair dealing. So he's saying by this constant, what he's saying is interference, her sort of stepping outside of her lane, it impeded on his ability to fulfill his contractual obligations to produce, edit, and direct this movie. So that just helps to support one of his legal claims. And I think also just as a theme, it sort of helps to add to what he's saying is, I did everything to try to appease her. There's no way I could, you know, possibly in his claim, harass her or create any sort of toxic workplace environment when all these communications show I did my best to try to work with her, collaborate, make her feel good, assure her. Right. So I think it accomplishes both of those things.
Bradford, before we let you go, one more question we got from Faded World on YouTube. So again, if you have questions on YouTube about this case, about what's happening today, please submit them. I'm going to be talking about it for the next hour, maybe hour and a half or so. The question is, why does public opinion even matter when it all happened between two people? Only the facts matter. Your response, Bradford.
Well, the whole point is the public opinion matters because that's where you're going to pick your jury from. These people have a lot of money, so I imagine that they're going to have a lot of jury selection experts. But that's why public opinion matters, where the public listens to cases, hears cases, different individuals hear cases. They start talking about it at the water cooler during work. People start reporting on it. It's in the newspaper. All those things affect individuals that may be on your jury. So all of a sudden you're picking a jury and people have heard about the case before. People that might not even know these two individuals probably have heard about this case at this point because you can't avoid it. You turn on your TV and someone is reporting about what's going on the Blake Lively case. So even individuals that are not Blake Lively fans, you know, individuals that work in different industries that have nothing to do with watching these movies or even being concerned with these movies or knowing who Justin Baldoni is. I think that's why it's so important when the public opinion comes in and they start saying, hey, I believe Justin Baldoni over her, you know, that is a problem that you have to overcome when you're selecting a jury. And that's one of the big things on any high profile case. You know, like I just got done with that case in San Francisco, that murder case in San Francisco. It was in the newspapers every day. So when you're picking a jury, you have to ask those questions. What have you read? What have you seen? Have you formed an opinion already without even hearing the evidence, just knowing what's out there in the ether? That's the problem that you have. And that's why you have to address it when it comes to public opinion.
Yep, it's good. Again, I think that they were both struggling, right? She was struggling in a public perception. People saw her as tone deaf when it came to the promotion of the film. People thought that she was mean and rude. She's trying to reverse the narrative and say, I was the victim here, okay? I was the victim of a smear campaign. She has accused him of being sexually harassing her on the set, right? And he's like, I have a right to fight this in the court of opinion, reverse the narrative as well. So you can kind of see it, two big stars. We're going to continue this conversation. We're going to continue our coverage of this. We have live updates coming from the court. We're going to be taking your questions. And also Elizabeth Milner is going to be coming on as well later to give us what she saw, what she heard in that courtroom. Bradford Cohen, Elizabeth Vulite, thank you both so much for coming on. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Jesse.
All right, we'll take a quick break. We'll be right back.
Dude, I'm so impressed with that. I'm trying to learn more because it feels like I don't use it. Same thing with it's a little scary. Even the DJI, wireless, like they have.
And welcome back, everybody, to Law and Crime special coverage of the Justin Baldoni Blake Lively first court hearing that's happening downtown in federal court in New York. I'm Jesse Weber, and thank you for joining us. So we have a lot going on right now. The parties, the various parties in this case, and the judge are working over logistical issues. Everything from, are these cases going to be consolidated into one? Are there going to be depositions? Is there going to be a protective order put in place about what the different lawyers and parties can and cannot say about this case? We're going through it all, and we're taking your questions right now on YouTube as well. So if you have questions about this case, comments about this case, submit them on there. We'll talk about them here on air. I'm going to be bringing on my guests in a second to talk more about this. I do want to let you know that not only are we getting live updates from that courtroom, unfortunately there are no cameras in federal court, but we do have live updates. We're keeping up to speed about what is going on, but also Law and Crime's own Elizabeth Milner is in that courtroom, is going to be coming out later. We are going to be hearing from her about what she saw, what she heard, and we believe there is going to be a press conference after this hearing as well. So let me bring on right now former federal prosecutor Nima Rahmani and also acclaimed criminal defense attorney Brian McMonigal of McMonigal, Perry, Maheu, Mishak, and Davis. Thank you both so much for coming on. Really appreciate it. So I want to get right into it. We have some updates from court. It's right now a lot about, this is a tangential issue. But Justin Baldoni's former publicist, the person who headed up this publicity firm, Stephanie Jones, filed her own separate lawsuit basically saying, I am not a part of anything that Justin Baldoni is accused of, that it was the person I hired, Jennifer Abel, who's actually being sued by Blake Lively. It was her idea to hire a crisis management expert. It was her idea to devise this PR campaign. Remember, Blake Lively says that Justin Baldoni and the co-defendants devised this smear campaign against her. So there's a lot of questions right now about Jones' lawsuit, and we'll get to that. So, for example, there was a whole back and forth where they were talking about whether a delay in this case makes sense. And then there was Jennifer Abel's lawyer says, my client's company is also woman-owned and a New York State court in this case. There was discovery before we moved the case here to federal court. They're talking about striking 168 pages. They're trying to get rid of the complaint. And then there was Lively's lawyer said, look at this, there are images of text messages, then a narrative from a speaker who don't know who it is. They have to be in the paragraphs of the complaint so we can move under Rule 11. We're prepared to do that now. We want Your Honor to know that they put it all up on a website. We think it's improper. Okay, so now that is about the idea, and this is a really important issue, that Justin Baldoni's team launched a website this past weekend with an amended complaint and a timeline of events, and they want to know, did that violate the rules of professional conduct? Is this a sanctionable issue? Basically litigating this case in the media and the court of public opinion and not the courtroom. We're going to get a little bit more word on what's happening there. But, Brian, I want to go to you about this as we discuss this issue. There's a lot of things that have been put forward by Justin Baldoni's team that have certainly been helping him in the court of public opinion, and I also wonder will help him in a future lawsuit. For example, one of the text messages that was revealed, apparently from Blake Lively says, and this was to Justin Baldoni, if you ever get around to watching Game of Thrones, you'll appreciate that I'm Khaleesi, and like her, I happen to have a few dragons. For better or worse, but usually for better, because my dragons also protect those I fight for. So really, we all benefit from those gorgeous monsters of mine. You will too. I can promise you. Now, she is referring, allegedly, to Ryan Reynolds, her husband, and her really good friend Taylor Swift. The allegation, Brian, is that Justin Baldoni felt the pressure of these A-list stars to do whatever Blake Lively wanted. And there's one thing to say, and then there's another thing for her to say this in text messages. That's the stuff that really helps his case.
There's no question about it. I thought the idea of his counsel to put these texts into this complaint to kind of even the playing field was brilliant. It makes everybody now look bad. He looked bad when they brought their first lawsuit. They have answered and countered, and quite frankly, they've made it an even fight. I mean, nothing matters in terms of what I say. What matters, I think, most is what the judge says in this case.
Yeah, sorry, Brian. Yeah, sorry, that was Nima. Nima, I know you can't hear. We're working on it. We'll get you audio. Nima, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, we'll work on getting you audio of Brian. Brian, I want to pick that about 1 second. Nima, stand by. Brian, because one of the things is yeah, like this seems to be helping, his side. And by the way, I wanted your perspective on one more thing. She has wanted, her side has said, Brian Friedman, I don't feel comfortable him taking my deposition, or at least her attorneys have been pushing forward that she doesn't want her deposition to be taken by Brian Friedman because he's been very public about this case and what he said about her. Judge Lyman just said in court, Brian, the Lively deposition will not be taken for now, but Miss Lively does not get to choose who deposes her, no? And Lively's lawyer responded, we'd be fine if they deposed her without documents, but there are other parties. And the judge said, submit a protective order. Have you ever heard a scenario where a person can dictate who deposes them?
Never. And neither has this judge, and it's not going to happen. That's another mistake, to try to suggest that you have the power to dictate who's going to depose you. I keep watching this stuff and I think to myself, is anybody worrying about the ramifications of something you say? I mean, I've always looked at it from the flip side. I don't care who deposes me. I'm going to go in and tell the truth, and my story is one that will hold up no matter who the deposer is. So she's not going to get her wish. Obviously, the judge has already let her know that, and she's going to get deposed, and she's going to get deposed by this lawyer.
Yeah, I think the judge is putting a pause on depositions for now, but eventually it will probably happen. Neiman, let me go to you. I'll give you an update about what's happening in court. So Baldoni's lawyer, Brian Friedman, just said only documents that can be accessed by anyone online or on that website. Judge says, I'm going to hear from Mr. Gottlieb about pretrial publicity in a moment. Is he wrong to do this? Or, on one hand, you could say it's genius, right? You put all that out there for the public to see before any protective order is put in place, and he won't be able to put it out there. At the same time, did he violate any rules of professional conduct by being a part of launching this website and putting information on there? Did he do anything wrong?
I don't think so, Jesse, because there's no order in place preventing him from doing so. And this case, like you said, is as much for the court of public opinion as it is for that New York courtroom. Justin Baldoni and Blake Lively don't need the money. This is about clearing their name and their reputations, and for Baldoni especially, not being canceled here in Hollywood. So what Friedman is doing is absolutely the right thing, advocating on behalf of his client. This is going to be Johnny Depp Amber Heard Part 2.
No cameras, though.
No cameras. Well, the case in California, at least, hopefully will have cameras. But obviously, New York State and federal court, there's no cameras there. So maybe everything gets consolidated out west where I am.
Let me ask you a question. We got more questions coming in from YouTube. Nima, as a former federal prosecutor, from Bumblebee 101 on YouTube, could Blake go to jail for lying?
Very unlikely. Perjury is rarely prosecuted, and I can't see it prosecuted in this case. We got the same question. I'm going back to Johnny Depp. Amber Heard, it seemed that she was lying under oath, and that was a question that we were consistently getting on Law and Crime while we were covering that case. Why isn't she being prosecuted? The practical reality is perjury is rarely prosecuted in the United States.
We got some more questions from Jane on YouTube. Wait, is this the same court that the Diddy hearing was at? Anybody know? This is the Southern District of New York. So this is the same courtroom where the case of Sean Diddy Combs is going to be heard. Obviously, this is a civil case. That's a criminal case, but both federal cases in this court. Okay, let me ask you this. We have an update, Brian, from court, from Judge Lyman. I'll adopt the case management plan with the following changes. Interrogatories due on March 14th in Jones v. Abel. So again, that's that separate lawsuit involving Justin Baldoni's former PR specialist versus her former employee. I'll adopt the plan except that I'm not adopting the date for the joint pretrial order nor deadline for summary judgment. I'm not too interested in that part. I am curious, when we talk about interrogatories due on March 14th, what does that mean?
Well, both sides will propound interrogatories in this case. They'll be asking enormous amounts of questions that'll have to be answered by the parties. And it's the first step, really, of the discovery process. And once interrogatories have been propounded and answered, then you move on to deposition. So it's really step one of the civil process. And my guess is these will be extensive interrogatories. They'll be asking every question under the sun.
And who answers them?
The individual parties have to answer them, and they'll be propounded on the parties involved in the lawsuit. They'll be prepared with the assistance of counsel. There'll be objections, obviously, to many of the interrogatories that'll be asked. That'll be litigation in and of itself, where the judge will be asked to rule on which of these interrogatories have to be answered and which don't. But it's really an important fact-finding mission for lawyers. They want to find out what the party's stance is, what they said, what they allege, where they were. So it'll be extensive and it'll take a life of its own for sure.
It's going to be very, very complicated, and as we were talking about with a March 2026 trial date, that could obviously change. That could obviously move. And we have an update from court. Judge Lyman, Mr. Gottlieb, do you wish to be heard on pretrial publicity? So this is Blake Lively's attorney. He responds, the issue is straightforward. The conduct of Mr. Freeman, again, this is Justin Baldoni's attorney, has violated New York rules of professional conduct. They prohibit extrajudicial statements like this, so out-of-court statements like this. This has been what's been the issue, and we'll see how the judge actually rules on that in a second. We have a question from SW on YouTube. Are the parties, a.k.a. Lively, Reynolds, Baldoni, in the courtroom for this hearing, or just their attorneys? Our understanding, it is just their attorneys, but obviously we're going to have Elizabeth Milner coming out giving us a perspective on who she saw, and so that might be different. But right now, our understanding is we do not have any of the celebrities in that courtroom. Okay, we have a question here from Nina Stanek on YouTube. Nima, why did Justin sue for extortion? And again, he has sued multiple parties for extortion here. I'll allow you to jump it, but the way I understand it is, it's basically they were being, Justin Baldoni says he and his company and the other defendants, they were being sued, they were being threatened that if they didn't do what Lively and Reynolds wanted, then she wouldn't promote the film. She would reveal what he claims are false allegations against him. Do I have it right? Is that what we're looking at in terms of the extortion claim, why he sued for extortion?
That is absolutely right. And oftentimes before lawsuits, there are these pretrial negotiations, and you can potentially take it too far. Now, I don't think this is something that's going to stand up as the case continues to be litigated. What civil plaintiff lawyers do is they throw all the claims out there. And the way extortion works is this. You can absolutely go to the press in general. You can absolutely even go to law enforcement. But you can't threaten to do so to extract something as part of some civil negotiation. And I do want to raise one important point. Gottlieb is in there. He's asking for this protective order, oftentimes referred to as a gag order. But let's not forget, it was Lively herself who went to the New York Times and provided those text messages. So they started this battle in the press, and it's pretty disingenuous for them right now to say that, Baldoni doesn't have the right to free response.
And their opinion is that Blake Lively actually colluded with the New York Times on putting this response, on launching that piece that was published, one day after she filed her complaint. And in the documents that were put forward on that website over the weekend, they say they have digital evidence to prove that the New York Times was planning this and was in possession of Blake Lively's complaint well before she actually filed it. So the New York Times actually responded, said that's false, but you can see why they're making that claim. All right, we have another question right now. This is from Hashani Kumarasingh on YouTube. This is for you, Brian. Will Taylor Swift be a part of this trial? Because again, the allegation is close friend of Blake Lively, close friend of Ryan Reynolds, and that she, at one point, had praised Blake Lively's changes, her rewrites to a key scene in this film. And Baldoni says that he felt the pressure from somebody like a Taylor Swift to just do what Blake Lively wanted. You think she's going to be a part of this trial?
Well, if there's a trial, she's a witness. I mean, they kind of put her in there as a witness in this case. She's a witness, certainly, to this so-called extortion that was going on. She's a witness to this meeting that occurred, apparently, at Blake Lively's place, where, he walks over there, and the next thing you know, he's talking to not only Blake Lively but Taylor Swift. I can tell you this: Taylor Swift doesn't want to be a witness at this trial.
No.
And I would expect that the way this thing is snowballing, the number of people now that are mentioned in it, or potential witnesses in it, if these folks don't step back for a second, get into a room and start negotiating, you're going to see a Donnybrook at trial. And I guarantee you, from what I'm seeing from Mr. Baldoni's lawyers, they'll bring in everybody and anybody into this case because they're not going down without a fight.
By the way, we have an update from court. Lively's lawyer said Mr. Freeman has been making statements to the media across the country. We've provided a list. He's appeared on the show of his former client, Megyn Kelly. We put him on notice on December 23rd, but that he is liable and is now a fact witness. What does that mean, Nima? He's a fact witness.
Well, as a lawyer, you can't be a lawyer and a witness in the same case. And if we're talking about potential defamation, and we know the New York Times has already been brought in, but the lawyers here are throwing that word around. If indeed the lawyer is communicating with the press, obviously those aren't privilege, and the nature of those communications may be an issue for a defamation claim. So what the Lively team is trying to do is say, hey, Friedman, you can't be a lawyer in the case and potentially a witness who has to testify. So this might be step one for them trying to disqualify him from the case.
Update from court. Lively's lawyer said their response is in essence that Mr. Lively started it, but the rules apply to statements of lawyers, and they haven't pointed to any. You can't just speak on and on and on in response. We have not requested a gag order. That's actually something they put forward in their filing with the court, that this is not a gag order. This is already a public case, but they're looking for a protective order about what exactly can be said and not said. Let me ask you this. We have more questions coming in from YouTube. So, Brian, you mentioned how long. You mentioned that how many people they'll bring forward. Question from Jane on YouTube. How long do you think this case will run for if it goes to trial?
I mean, it all depends on what is remaining after pretrial motions, how many counts, what the case looks like, if it's combined. This could, I will say this, unlike California, and I'm not disparaging California, but I've seen cases in California take months and months and months that take about a week in New York. Most of the federal judges in New York, and probably California as well, but in federal court, they're not messing around. They'll streamline this thing. The problem is it's multi-layered. You're looking at probably, at least a month, 3 weeks to a month of trial, I would think. But it'll be faster than it is in most jurisdictions in New York, like everything else is.
Nima, we have two questions I'm going to combine together. This is from Heather Iron from YouTube. If they lose, will they have to pay the full $400 million to Justin Baldoni? And also from Kitu on YouTube, if Blake loses, how would the payment to Justin be structured? So will it really be $400 million, and how would it be structured?
Not necessarily. In civil complaints, lawyers can ask for anything or really nothing at all. All that really matters is what those jurors return when they come back from that deliberation room. And oftentimes, what the lawyers ask for in closing arguments has no bearing on what they asked for in the complaint. So that's a good number for the media and folks that are watching. Obviously, they want a number that's going to exceed Lively and Reynolds' net worth, but ultimately, that may have nothing to do with the case. Once you get a judgment, then you have to enforce the judgment. And there's three primary ways of doing so. You can garnish wages, you can levy bank accounts, you can attach and sell real property. There's a few other ways, but once you get that judgment, then the enforcement begins. Obviously, folks like Lively and Reynolds, they have significant assets to go after if Baldoni wins and gets a big verdict.
So we have some more questions coming in. This is, but first I'll give you an update from court. Lively's lawyer said, we cite the General Motors case of 2015 about lawyers' communications adopting the New York State rules for the federal case. Again, the idea is what Friedman doing? Is it violate the rules of professional conduct? Judge says, why isn't the harm addressed by the ethical authorities in New York? The Lively's lawyer responds, Mr. Freeman is pro hoc vice, which means he's not necessarily admitted in New York, but he's admitted on a temporary basis to hear this case. Let me ask you this question, Brian. We got a question from Custard Shucker. How long does a deposition take Is there a time limit if we're talking about a potential deposition of either Blake Lively or Ryan Reynolds or Justin Baldoni?
Usually the parties agree on time limits, and in a lot of the federal civil depositions I've been involved with, people will agree that it can't exceed 5 or 6 hours. I'm not seeing a lot of agreement on this case. So my guess is the judge at some point in time will intervene and just say, listen, we're going to give you X amount of hours. But they could be lengthy ones. In a case like this, I mean, you could be looking at 2 or 3 days worth of depositions, 8-hour days. So, but I have a feeling this judge is going to put timelines on them because otherwise these people will be deposed for weeks on end. So it could be a couple days, I think, worth of depositions for sure.
Well, Brian, I'll follow that up with another question we got from Nina Stanek. Will this go to trial or most likely be settled?
Well, you never know. I would think that the lawyers in this case, now realizing what this has transformed into, as I said earlier, this does not look good for anybody. You're going to be getting people on this jury that go to work every morning that are not really going to understand the whining of very wealthy people. And that's a danger for both sides in this case. The reputational harm that's happening because of the litigation and the trial. Again, is that something that these parties want? They don't need, as my able colleague has just said, money. This isn't about money. It's about protecting your image, your reputation. If I think at the end of the day, if I'm involved in this case, and I'm not, but if I was, I'd be getting everybody in a room and trying to figure out a way to stop everybody's dirty laundry from being put into the public domain where it now rests, and nobody looks good.
Again, I really think that this is about reversing the narrative in your favor for the public. I mean, these are two stars who really are facing some tough PR right now. And it becomes, right now, as I said before, we had a poll up on our YouTube page. 96% of people side with Justin Baldoni. 4% with Blake Lively. That's saying something. So she may feel the incentive. Not saying you should look at the Law&Crime poll, but if you look at a lot of people on social media and out there, they're supporting him over her. And so you wonder if she's going to keep on fighting this. But could she reverse the public narrative? Okay, got another update from court. Lively's lawyers, again, talking about the statements from Brian Friedman, Justin Baldoni's lawyer. Their statements are being amplified on social media. It's very hard to unring the bell. Judge says, give me 1 or 2 examples. The Blake Lively's lawyer responds on January 7th. Mr. Friedman said, we're releasing the statements to show an attempt to take over the movie. So again, the judge still considering this. He's going to ask Brian Friedman a little bit more about this as well. He's going to have an opportunity to respond. Let me ask you this, Nima. Question from Lindsay M. on YouTube. Can the judge force Baldoni to shut down the website that was launched over the weekend?
The judge can force Baldoni's lawyer absolutely to shut down that website. And judges have a lot of reign and discretion to manage their courtroom and their cases. And if the judge thinks that this may prejudice the jury pool or otherwise affect the integrity of the proceedings, the judge can order the lawyer to shut it down.
I want to follow up with you on this, Nima. So a big question is, why did she file the lawsuit, right? So we have a question from Tracy Kotcher on YouTube. Do you think that Blake thought she could silence Baldoni, that she started this whole thing? How did she not realize this become big as it is now? So the question, I would reframe it, I think it's a good question, is when she filed that lawsuit, or filed the complaint, excuse me, and then it was published by the New York Times, I mean, public sentiment turns against Justin Baldoni. That was pretty bad. If you look at all the text messages between him and his PR people and his crisis management people, it looked like he devised or was part of a campaign to smear her in the media, and that all of the negative press we saw surrounding Blake Lively in last summer was his doing, and that, allegations that he sexually harassed her on set. Did she not realize that there was a different narrative, that he had the other text messages, footage, and that this might happen? Because I do want to know, buyer's remorse. Do you think right now she might be regretting launching this?
I do, Jesse. I think she grossly underestimated Baldoni's resolve and his response. both legal and PR. And it's turned dramatically. I mean, this is one of the biggest public relations comebacks that I've seen. Let's not forget, Lively and Reynolds have significantly more assets. They were able to convince William Morris Agency to drop Baldoni. There was an award, a women's advocacy award, that was rescinded shortly after the lawsuit. And like you said, Jesse, well over 80 to 90% of the people, at least on social media, support Justin Baldoni. And they believe that Lively's team cherry-picked pieces of evidence, and that once they reviewed everything, including the text messages, of course, but that voice note, the rooftop dancing scene, and they view it in their entirety, a lot of people think that this was about creative control and Lively trying to resurrect her own image, her own tarnished image. So you have to give credit to Baldoni's PR team. They've really done a masterful job responding to the initial allegations.
Talk about response. We have two questions right now, one from Autumn, one from Arizona. Why hasn't Sony made a statement one way or another? Is Sony not speaking for Baldoni, showing support for Blake Lively? I don't think that's true. I think when she originally came forward with her allegations, Sony did release a statement. I'm finding it right now on Variety, where they said a Sony Pictures Entertainment spokesperson told Variety, "We have previously expressed our support for Blake in connection with her work on and for the film. We fully and firmly reiterate that support today. Further, we strongly condemn any reputational attacks on her. Any such attacks have no place in our business or in a civil society." I don't know if maybe we could see if we found a more recent statement, but they have commented on this. We have another question. This is from Alicia, so I'll throw this to you, Brian. Baldoni is doing everything public. Website, unnecessary letter to the judge. Is this part of her complaint regarding a smear campaign?
Well, I mean, if I'm understanding the question correctly, isn't he dignifying her complaint by doing what he's doing? It's really just the opposite. It's a person protecting themselves. He was destroyed in Hollywood as a result of her complaint. And yet what they've now done is they've reversed the narrative, and they've basically said, well, you can destroy me in Hollywood, but you can't destroy me in the world because we got the facts on our side. And he really didn't have a choice. I mean, they put his back up against a wall. They labeled him a creep. And he's now come back and defended himself, which is what you expect people to do in litigation. And Nima's right. Not only was there some brilliance on his PR team, there's been some brilliant lawyering going on here. And I know they're working on the edges, and I know they may go in today and maybe get their wrist slapped a little bit, but they've won. They've won a major battle here in restoring his name. And I think Blake Lively and her team are probably regretting and rethinking maybe how they went about this.
And I have one more question before I toss to something. I want to go to Nima on this. So we have an update from court. Lively's lawyer says on his client's show, Megyn Kelly, he said evidence is being planted. They're talking about what Brian Friedman said. He said Blake Lively was no victim. She used allegations of sexual harassment to try to become the director of the movie. The judge says, isn't that his complaint? Lively's lawyer responds, you're not supposed to launch attacks on the character of your adversary. He is making representations about discovery material. We don't have an opportunity to rebut it. He took a video clip and released it, then commented on it. Talk to me about two things here, Nima. A, maybe you could say don't release information in the media. Don't release, this footage. Don't release text messages. But his comments going on the podcasts, going on TV interviews, what's the line? If you're a lawyer, can't you reiterate what your defenses are, what your claims are in a lawsuit, or is it not appropriate?
Well, there's two categories, right? You talked about it, Brian. The first is the evidence. Judges can be hesitant to release evidence because we don't know if it's admissible or if it's going to come in, right? So you don't want potential jurors viewing everything before the trial. That's the concern there. But you're right. When it comes to attorney statements, attorneys need to defend their clients. And, this isn't a criminal case where you're talking about the rights of an accused and the potential injustice when someone potentially going to prison. We're talking about a civil case. We're talking about money. And that door has already been opened by Lively's team. So it really is fair response for Baldoni's lawyer to go on TV or have a press conference and rebut these allegations.
Baldoni.
Jesse.
Yeah. Sorry, Brian. Please continue.
I was going to say, it's interesting. We're now dealing with the real tests and the limits of what we call litigation privilege. There is a litigation privilege. Lawyers in a courtroom can say whatever they want, but when they get out of that courtroom, they now are fair game for allegations of defamation. So I think that's exactly the road that Lively's lawyers are trying to drive down right now, which is he's long out of the boundaries of litigation privilege, and now he's in a whole different world of personal attacks that makes him open for defamation. So that's the heart of that argument that's going on right now. And in a world that we live in, we're going to be seeing litigation that and case law that really changes what litigation privilege really means anymore.
So we have an update on that. So now Brian Friedman has stepped into the mix. This is a live update. For months before any filing was made in this case, the New York Times, giving 12 hours notice, put out an article that completely devastated, meaning his client, and they're basically responding to the fact that when the reporter from the New York Times reached out to Baldoni's side, they only gave him a short amount of notice, but he would say, Baldoni's argument was the New York Times was preparing to release this piece well in advance. The judge said, you don't have enough evidence that Mr. Gottlieb, the attorney for Blake Lively, was behind that. And Mr. Friedman said they used the press. Friedman told the judge on January 2nd, they said nothing changes anything about Miss Lively's claim. We encourage people to read her complaint. The judge said, you could have said that, review our pleadings, but you went further. And Friedman said, they said sexual harassment is illegal. So again, his argument is, I'm only responding to what they're saying. I want to play you something real quick as we go to more updates in this. So going back to that audio that was released, talking about things that were released to the media and the public, that voice note that was left by Justin Baldoni to Blake Lively at 2 a.m., again, this is to provide context, this is after she had suggested rewrites to a key scene. She arguably felt neglected, that he wasn't really taking her rewrite seriously, and he would say that's why she enlisted Ryan Reynolds and Taylor Swift to come to him, allegedly pressure him into accepting her rewrites. That's his allegation. But this is another part of the voice note I want to play. Take a listen.
Oh, and there's one thing that I do need to say, which is I am so sorry you have been through what you've been through with these other filmmakers and producers or whoever the people were that you worked with. It just pissed me off. Those that I'm just still kind of blown away that this is the industry that we're in and that you've experienced that as a woman. And I know I don't need to say it, but that's not at all going to be or will be, and hopefully it's not been the experience with me.
Nima, what do you take away from that part?
I think it helps Justin Baldoni. I mean, if you listen to the entire voice note, there's a couple things that are potentially problematic. Obviously, sending a 2 a.m. voice note to a female colleague talking about a baby being on her boob. But his tone throughout the voice note is very kind, apologetic, and he seems sensitive to her needs. And if she is someone that is repeatedly raising these claims against others, that may call her credibility into question. If she thinks she's being harassed in every film or every TV show she's working on because she's a woman, jurors may take issue with that.
Brian Friedman just said in court, my client suffered hundreds of millions of dollars in damages. We're willing to stipulate to the local rules. The judge said, I will adopt the rule with some reluctance. Still, I don't want satellite litigation about statements of the lawyers. Which way do you think the judge is leaning here, Brian?
I think he's just going to basically admonish the lawyers to simply say, you're now on the clock. The local rules apply. You can make use of the privilege that you have inside the courtroom. You can refer to legal documents that you have submitted and prepared, complaints, etc. You may not talk about, give personal opinions about, discuss anything that's remotely falling on the possibility of defamatory remarks about any party in this case, whether it be Ms. Lively or her lawyers. You're going to be bound to the local rules, even though you're not a lawyer from this jurisdiction.
Neem, I want to ask you about the claim against the New York Times for defamation. There's a question from Key2 on YouTube. Could the journalist from the New York Times who wrote the article be deposed as well in the case? I would probably say absolutely. I think that'll be a key witness. But do you think that's a strong claim against the New York Times? So it's not just saying, you know, it is saying you didn't do your due diligence, but it's saying you cherry-picked messages, you provided an out-of-context of characterization of what was happening. But more so, you allegedly colluded with Blake Lively to release this and didn't give our side any time to properly respond. Suing a major publication like the New York Times and suing for defamation, not an easy task. But this, they're saying, this steps beyond anything that we've seen in the past. What do you think?
It's not easy, but the tide has turned when it comes to defamation cases. I mean, we've seen our current president had some success there. And obviously, going back to Johnny Depp, Amber Heard, you know, that was an op-ed in the Washington Post. That was an issue there. Let me give you some inside baseball for folks that really don't practice in this area. There's a reason that these publications are able to get their stories out so quickly. The lawyers leak them the complaint or transmit it to them hours or days before they're filed. That's why they have so much time to write such a good story. And, you know, they get a scoop there. Now, oftentimes, they will do their due diligence. They'll want to review the evidence in support of the complaint. They'll want to talk to the other side. But that's something that happens pretty frequently. So I wouldn't be surprised if the journalist at the New York Times had plenty of runway to write that story, and Baldoni's team had a short period of time with which to respond.
This is an interesting update for you guys. So, Brian, Judge Lyman just said, if it turns out this ends up being litigated in the press, I may accelerate the date of the trial. Unless this case is settled, a jury will speak. Baldoni's attorney, Brian Friedman, said, damage is done before a jury speaks. Judge Lyman says, I get it. What does that tell you?
I think what this judge is doing is he's sending a message to these people. Like, you better get this thing settled, and you better get it settled quickly because everybody looks bad. And please don't make me bring a jury in here.
Could he do that?
I have to.
Could he do that? Could he accelerate the trial date?
He could absolutely accelerate the trial date. He could put discovery deadlines and put these people on the clock. I mean, these are big firms that are involved, and he can say, you can get all this done. Now, how fast can he get them in there? I mean, there's depositions, there's interrogatories. It's going to take months. But what could typically be a case that's 2 years out, he could get it in there within 6 months pretty easily. And, you know,
But wait, wouldn't I got to ask you, Brian? I'm sorry. Wouldn't that be to Baldoni's benefit? I mean, look right now. Look what's been released, and right now, 96% of our viewers believe that Baldoni is the one in the right. Not saying that's what a jury would think. Not saying what everybody who views this case would think. But you got to say, if the case was accelerated, he might be. And he's like, I want to take a deposition right now of Blake Lively. Maybe he's thinking that's not the worst case scenario.
Oh, I can assure you he is. But you know what? There's risk for him too. You know, don't forget how this thing got started. It got started because there's an allegation of sexual harassment, and I'm sure we haven't seen recently all the evidence there is to that. So both sides can really be crippled by this at a trial. But this judge is basically letting them know you're not going to carry on. Not on my watch. Do it the right way, and I'll give you as much time as you need to litigate this case until there's a trial and until there's a settlement. Misbehave like you continue to do and take things into your own hands like you continue to do, and I'll have you in this courthouse within the next 3 to 6 months, and you'll be trying this case.
Now, I've been seeing some of the commenters saying that we seem so pro Blake Lively. First of all, let me just say, we're trying to present both sides, and even if you are pro Blake Lively, we're not choosing one way or another, you got to know what the other side's arguments were. So I think it's interesting, Brian, when you say that, because, Nima, one of the things that I think is the biggest problem for Justin Baldoni's side is that 30-point list of demands that Blake Lively had demanded that Justin Baldoni and Wayfarer agreed to before production resumed on the film. And I mean, it's everything. No more showing nude videos or images of women, including producer's wife, to Blake Lively and or employees. He says there's a context to why that was shown. There's also no more inquiries by Mr. Baldoni to Blake Lively's trainer without her knowledge or consent to disclose her weight. 30 points. He says that he and Wayfarer agreed to this list of 30 demands. Now, he says, I don't agree with the allegations, but I agreed to abide by that. I acquiesce to Blake Lively. Do you think that's a limitation in the case? Do you think that's a weakness in the case? You're agreeing to a list of 30-point demands that you say are false allegations against you just to get the movie going because you feel intimidated by Ryan Reynolds and Blake Lively. How does he overcome that?
It's a significant weakness for Baldoni's team because they're very specific allegations, right? You're talking about weight, for instance, right? Baldoni has to respond and say, well, he has a back problem. You're talking about discussion of pornography and sex and those types of things, right? I mean, very specific allegations, and Baldoni's agreeing to them. So he better have a very good story as to what the context was, what the precursor was to all of this. And look, we're talking about a movie set, right? We've talked about Taylor Swift, of course, and the infamous Penthouse discussion over creative control, but there's going to be a lot of people that witnessed all of this happening. So if you're Baldoni and there was some discussion of pornography or sex or anything like that, you better believe that there's some witnesses there aside from Blake Lively, independent witnesses that heard that. So if you're Baldoni's team, you got to tread cautiously there.
Okay, I want to give everybody an update. The court has adjourned for the day. We're waiting for a presser, which will be interesting considering we were all talking about what statements can and cannot be made. This is a live look outside of that federal courthouse. As soon as that presser starts, we will go live. I should also let you know that Elizabeth Milner, our very own, will be coming out of that courthouse and giving us a bird's eye view about what she saw and heard as well. So as we see that to happen, let me go back to some more questions that we're getting from YouTube. This is from Annie Simone. Brian, I'll go to you. Why would Baldoni make such a call about harassments before they even started filming? I guess that is regard to the voice note. Again, I provided the context that he seemed to be apologizing for not accepting her rewrites. He would argue that I was, acquiescing to whatever she wanted because I was fearful of her and her husband and Taylor Swift. I just wanted this filming to go forward. Blake Lively was getting very personal with her insecurities in a text message from 10 minutes before. But do you think in a case where he's accused of sexual harassment, that call, talking about that, this set will be different, talking about apologizing, do you think that hurts him?
Well, it looked like he was apologizing for the conduct of others. It looked like he was trying to take a high road. I mean, I agree that the timing of the call isn't particularly good for him in terms of 2 o'clock in the morning, et cetera. But he sounds very good on that call. And then chronologically, when did that call come? Why did it come? I mean, the chronology of this case is going to be telling. And that's why I have to say, and I know I'm repeating myself at length, but one of the things that his lawyers, I thought, did brilliantly was to provide a text chronology. And I think Nima's right. This case is going to boil down to what everybody else says. Because, they're going to take Lively, they're going to look at her, they're going to say, well, look at these text messages. They're going to look at him and say, well, this is kind of creepy behavior. What's the rest of the set going to say? What are other actresses, perhaps, that have appeared in connection with this Baldoni going to say? What are the non-zillionaires and billionaires who were involved in the interactions going to say? That'll carry the day at a trial, I can assure you.
We've got a question from Terry M. And again, we are waiting for that press conference to happen outside of the courtroom. Could conspiracy charges, Nima, come from them trying to steal the movie and the rights, making it criminal? The allegation being that Blake Lively, and help of Ryan Reynolds, was trying to take control of the movie, the promotional efforts, the marketing efforts. Her version of the film, according to Baldoni, is the one that was released. Is that a crime?
Very unlikely. And we all love criminal charges, and it started with perjury. Now we're talking about conspiracy, and the vast majority of the cases we cover here on Law and Crime are criminal cases where people are going to jail. But I can tell you, as a former prosecutor, the last thing you want to do is get involved in a civil dispute, and really that's what this is. This is a civil dispute. You don't want to bring the hammer of the law down on one side or another. It's really a misuse of our criminal justice system, and I know there's been a lot of talk about that in the political scene, but the same thing applies in the civil context as well.
So we have a question from Nina Stanek. Did the judge rule regarding the gag order? It's this protective order. It seems like they're trying to put a protective order in place in March 11th, and sort of a warning and an admonishment to Brian Friedman and others about don't litigate this in the press, but not entirely clear. Hopefully when Elizabeth Milner comes out, we'll get a little bit more clarification on that. Brian, we got a question from Megan Elizabeth on YouTube. Based on information currently available, doesn't Justin have the stronger case?
Well, they're certainly winning the in the court of public opinion. There's no question. They're certainly winning in terms of their most recent response. There's no question about it. The counterclaim here, for lack of a better way to describe it, was outstanding. Obviously, that's not going to be the end of this case. And what's interesting right now, and I was just thinking to myself, I wonder what's going on right now. Right now, both sides are thinking about very carefully what they're going to say when they walk out of this courthouse, because the judge is watching and he has put them on notice that he's going to be listening to commentary, whatever that commentary is, and it better be within the rules. So my guess is they're all thinking very long and hard about what they say in front of those microphones in a few minutes.
Oh, I agree with you. Maybe they'll talk about what happened in court today. Usually what happens, right, they talk about what the judge decided, what the next steps are, when they plan to file what. You know what?
Here we go.
I think, and that's Brian Friedman right there in the tan jacket. If we can go live, let's take it.
And we really respect Judge Lyman, and we're really looking forward to moving the case along as quickly as possible. Our clients are devastated and want to move the case along as quickly as possible. And we just couldn't be more pleased with how the case was handled today, how it was managed, and we're going to move as quickly as we possibly can and prove our innocence in a world where sometimes people judge you before they give you a chance. And we're going to change that. Thank you.
Mr. Friedman, you mentioned that your client suffered financial loss. Can you elaborate on the projects you lost out on?
Okay, so really short and sweet there. Brian, I'll start with you. Didn't take questions from reporters, said this was very happy with what the judge decided today, wants to move this case along. This is something that has devastated his clients. They're looking forward to proving their innocence, and didn't say Blake Lively, didn't mention Blake Lively by name, but this is a world sometimes where people judge before they give you a chance. Does that mean you think he's going to go on the media tour? You think he's going to do more interviews, more podcasts, and things like that?
I don't think he is. I think he's going to do exactly what he did today. Today, he was a lawyer in every sense of the word. He kissed the judge. He showed deference to the court. He advocated on behalf of his client. He spoke to the world about giving this man a chance and letting this case being decided in a courtroom. It was perfection, and I think that's what you're going to see from here on in. I think they did what they did. And they have rallied from it, and now it's going to be old-fashioned lawyering.
Neem, I'll give you a chance to respond as well to that, but I also wanted to ask you, we had a question from Wanda Meyer on YouTube, and I just clicked out of it, unfortunately, so let me just give a second to go back to it. Where is it? There it is. Okay. When does an actor, again referring to Blake Lively, rewrite scenes and tell the director, Justin Baldoni, what to do? Did Blake Lively try to take over this film? Will future directors want to work with her?
Well, first, Brian is absolutely right. Brian Friedman is going to really quit while he's ahead. Now, he's not going to stop talking to the media, but because they're so far ahead in the public relations battle, and now really Lively can't do much to respond because of what the judge said today, I don't expect to see that media tour that we've been seeing the past couple of weeks. With respect to an actor or actress rewriting. It really depends on who they are. Now, certainly, A-list actors in Hollywood do have some creative control. The question is, did this exceed the bounds of what the parties agreed to, what was expected? And let's not forget, the creative control only matters because it explains an alternate theory of what the disagreement was about. Baldoni is saying that this wasn't harassment at all. Lively was upset, not because of anything I did, Justin Baldoni, because I refused to give in and give her control over the film. So it's really an alternate theory. It doesn't really matter whether she wanted the control or not.
We got one more question to each of you guys. Brian, do courts ever order psych evaluations? And if someone is determined by a court-ordered psych evaluation to have a manipulative personality disorder, how does that affect the case, Brian?
The answer is yes, but not in the context of a civil case. Psych evaluations are usually done when there is a defendant who simply isn't competent or is unable to understand really the nature of the proceedings. I've never seen it in a civil context, and it would have to be done by request. You won't see that here. There won't be any psych evaluations here, I can assure you.
All right. Nima, one more question before we take a quick break, and then we're going to get Elizabeth Milner on because she was in that courtroom. Want to see what she heard and what she saw and heard. Let me go to you on this, the point about this weekend. So the website that was launched by Justin Baldoni's team, the thing that people are really talking about is the Ryan Reynolds text messages, right? The messages between him and Justin Baldoni before all the drama started. They were comical. There seemed to be the idea that developing rapport and a mutual respect. Also had asked Baldoni to adjust the shooting schedule so that Ryan Reynolds and Blake Lively, they could be together, their family could be together. There is an argument, and I'm curious, there is an argument, there was a big part of that message where he talks about how lucky Justin Baldoni is to have Blake Lively, how creative she is, how much she's benefited him. The argument could be, is this the beginning, setting up the breadcrumbs for her to eventually take control over the film? Or is it just well-intentioned, there was nothing nefarious going on? Which way do you look at those messages from Ryan Reynolds?
It does support the argument that in just a matter of time that they're going to try to step in and take control. But what's also important to me from the text messages is it shows the nature of their relationship, Lively and Baldoni, and of course Reynolds as well. And here's the important thing to know about sexual harassment. It has to be unwelcome. So you see these two, there's this somewhat playful banter, they're exchanging memes and jokes and that type of thing. So if Lively is going to win this case, and I tell this to all victims of sexual harassment, you got to show that the conduct was unwelcome, that you were not participating in it. So I think that's going to be important evidence in terms of the defense of the merits of the sexual harassment claim.
Okay, I'm going to take a quick break. Guys, I think you're staying with us. We're going to get Elizabeth Milner up on here. Again, she was in that courtroom. Stay with us here on Law&Crime. We have a lot more to report on the latest in the Justin Baldoni, Blake Lively legal saga. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back, everybody. So we are continuing our coverage with the Justin Baldoni, Blake Lively first court hearing. A lot of things happened in that courtroom in terms of scheduling, in terms of a protective order. Before I bring in Elizabeth Milner, who was actually in that courtroom, she's outside of the federal courthouse in New York, I just want to thank real quick Brian McMonigal, and I also want to thank Nima Rahmani for both of you for coming on. Your great expertise on this case. Appreciate both of you.
Thanks, Jesse. Thanks,
Thank
Brian.
you for having us.
You got it. All right. So now I'm going to go to Elizabeth Milner. Elizabeth, thanks so much for coming on. You were in that courtroom for this proceeding. First thing I was hoping you could clarify, what exactly happened with the protective order? The big conversation was whether or not Brian Friedman, or let alone any other attorneys, how much they can litigate this case in the public, what out-of-court statements can they make, what can't they say. Still trying to get clarification about that. A lot of our commenters online are wondering about that. And also, you were there. I don't think you saw Ryan Reynolds or Blake Lively, but what did you see and what did you hear?
Yeah, no, unfortunately for our viewers, there was no Justin Baldoni, there was no Blake Lively, there was no Ryan Reynolds or any other family members, as far as I could tell from being inside that courtroom. As far as that clarification on whether or not a gag order will be inflicted, no, not necessarily. So what's going to happen now is that the judge was actually pretty reluctant, to kind of issue a Rule 3.6. And from your clarification, Jesse, during that commercial break, that was more so just about ethics, about, Brian Friedman making those statements to the media, trying to, as Blake Lively's attorneys would explain it, trying to potentially taint the jury pool by making these out of comments. But it was kind of interesting in the sense that it was a lot of back and forth inside that courtroom. So, as far as every statement that was made by Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds' attorney, it was always countered by Justin Baldoni's attorneys. Well, they started it first. They began this first. Had this not happened, this wouldn't be an issue right now. So I think on their side, them being the Baldoni team, they're just kind of playing defense, right? Like, all of this started back in August, as far as we could tell. Honestly, all of it started back on that set of It Ends With Us. But, it's a bunch of he said, she said, but the judge kind of wanted to stop the he said, she said. And as far as kind of making these statements out to the media, again, that Rule 3.6 will go into effect. So that way, as far as ethics goes, and this was something actually Baldoni's team wanted. They encouraged it. They came out here during that press conference and were actually pleased by the way that the hearing went. And so I think that a lot of things as far as going forward now might be a lot lesser than it was before. But look, that website is still up and running. I actually saw the website on Friday when it had first launched, and I think that was also a big issue from Blake Lively's team, is that they were okay with the website going up as far as the amended complaint goes. Now, when it came to that timeline, they actually wanted that timeline to be incorporated with the complaint as far as going into that paragraph form, because they kind of explained that this was all their side of the story. This was one-sided. But, when you have receipts, proofs, timeline, facts, text messages, all this stuff to kind of counter the claims that, your client has put forth, it's kind of hard to kind of diminish that a little bit as far as, what is the possible jury pool going to see, before they're getting called for this case. And that, of course, we know that the trial is going to be slated for next year. They're going to keep that date of next year, even though the judge kind of mentioned a little bit that he might be interested in pushing that date forward, because it seems like everyone across the board just wants a resolve. Everyone across the board is claiming, with their respective parties, that they have been either emotionally or financially damaged by everything that's going on, whether it's Blake and Ryan Reynolds, who, again, we have to stress, Ryan Reynolds was not even a part of the It Ends With Us movie. Again, there's a lot of conspiracies, kind of what role he plays a little bit right now, but just sticking to the facts here. Whereas, Baldoni's team, they're being accused of sexual harassment, all this types of things. So it's a lot of he said, she said. It's a lot of kind of mess. It's kind of giving you a little eeriness of what had happened with the Johnny Depp Amber Heard situation. But again, this isn't a criminal case. This is not a criminal matter. No one's going to jail. This is a civil matter. So I think as far as the resolve goes, could we all argue that there's been damage to every single party involved? Absolutely. But it'll be up to a jury to decide how much damage and who goes to what. But as far as going inside the courtroom, again, this is a civil matter. And so what was called today was Lively versus Wayfarer Studios. And so what would happen when you go inside that courtroom, very similar to, when I've been to those Diddy hearings, is that, because it was the Lively complaint, so, or the Lively matter, I should say, the Lively team was sitting up front, kind of where the state or the government would sit as far as if it was a criminal matter. The defense was sitting right behind them. And then all scattered throughout the court room, especially, was just a bunch of media. There's a lot of public interest in this case. I open up TikTok every single day, and it's new updates every single day about what is going on with Blake and Justin. And then I think this amended complaint that's been added to the website, one big thing that came out of this hearing as well, too, was just the fact that the New York Times was added to this list. And so with the New York Times being added, Justin Baldoni's attorneys kind of signaled that they might try to motion for a dismissal in the matter that's involved in California, mainly so that way everything can be all in one here in New York, which might save up some time. So that way, all parties aren't going from New York to California, California to New York, all kind of talking about the same matter here. But, if you go onto that website, if you print out the documents, and I did print out what I could without Joanne, our office manager, kind of yelling at me about using up nearly 300 pages of printer paper in the office. What I did was I ended up printing out about 50 pages from the amended complaint, but I printed out the entire New York Times complaint as well, too, or the lawsuit, I should say. And it's just a lot of paper. It's a lot of documents. It's a lot of evidence that Baldoni's team is adamant that this will prove that their client never sexually harassed or defamed or, spoke lowly of Blake Lively or Ryan Reynolds or any of that sort. So a lot of this matter here today will kind of more will come along. So essentially what's going to be happening next is a lot of discovery. So the discovery between the agents and what they may have said to Baldoni, or the discovery between Blake and Ryan, even a potential deposition to Blake Lively could be happening very soon. And again, all parties were kind of stressing that they want things to kind of happen at a very quick turnaround. They want things to be done and over with. Brian Friedman earlier was saying that his client has suffered financially and emotionally with Wayfarer Studios. Mike Gottlieb on the other side says that Blake Lively has also suffered the same. And then, kind of adding on the alleged smear campaigns from both sides, a huge factor that was also mentioned was the metadata. The metadata is important because, a lot of people, we will call them armchair detectives here at Law&Crime, but, some people, and according to this complaint, call them online sleuths who, pointed out like, hey, the New York Times was allegedly well aware of this complaint going to be filed. And honestly, even just from a PR perspective, and we know here at Law&Crime that, it takes time to get statements from everybody. It takes time to come up with these graphics. It takes time for everyone to kind of get their ducks in order for them to publish a big story like this. So the big question is, when did they know it and how did they know it? Who gave them this information? How did everything start rolling from them? And that metadata kind of alluding to the fact that they knew as early as October. Now, we all know that the story wasn't published until December. And again, I'm talking about the New York Times article that kind of really just set everything in motion as far as what's going to be happening inside a court of law. Before, it was just kind of, bad publicity, the ends with us, press tour and all of that sort, but then they took it to the courts. It ends in the courts, that type of thing. And so it'll be interesting to see, one, how the New York Times responds, because they are very adamant and very strong that they are standing by their reporting in the matter. But as far as we know right now, they haven't been subpoenaed yet. That might have changed in the matter of since I've been in that hearing, because again, it's a federal court case, so I am not allowed to have my phone. I'm not allowed to have my Apple Watch in there. I'm stuck with a pen and paper just to kind of so that way no electronic devices are entered into that courtroom. So as far as kind of what happens next, Jesse, is that the discovery will be exchanged. They kind of want the discovery, at least the timeline of it, to start kind of unfolding by next week, by Valentine's Day, and then they're supposed to have all their ducks in a row by March, and then we'll kind of see where the case kind of unfolds from there.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, the judge basically warned Brian Friedman, basically like, do not litigate this in the court of public opinion. The big thing is there is a rule, you mentioned it, you can't make out-of-court statements that might materially prejudice this case. And not saying that's what he was doing, but you don't want to get to that level. And he said, if you keep on doing this, or any side keeps on doing this, I will move up that trial date. And we spoke about it before with Brian McMonigal. The judge can do this. So it'll be very interesting to see if he does interviews, if he does podcasts. Will he release any more information going forward? And I will tell you one more thing. You mentioned the website that was launched over the weekend. We actually have a sidebar coming out later today. We went through the amended complaint. We went through that new timeline that was drafted by Justin Baldoni's side. picked out some of the key points. The new Ryan Reynolds text messages, a very interesting still image that has been put forward. How does this change the context of this whole case? That's coming out later today. Elizabeth, thank you so much for your reporting. I know it's cold outside. We're going to get you out of there. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much for being our eyes and ears in that courtroom.
All right. Thanks, Jesse.
All right, everybody. So thank you so much for joining us on our special coverage of the Justin Baldoni, Blake Lively first court hearing. We will make sure to continue to do these as the case progresses, especially since there are no cameras in that courtroom. We will do our best to report live about what is happening. And again, continue all of our coverage on this case. It's one of the biggest ones that we're covering. I want to thank all of you for submitting your questions on YouTube. We appreciate all of you. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll catch you next time.